I'm going to go ahead and kind of start telling you a little bit about the system and what it looks like and what it feels like. So what you should see right now is the home page, and this is the home page that will be presented to you every single time you log in to the Skills Wisconsin platform. And what you'll see is a couple of things. First off, at the top you will see a chatter feed, and I'll talk more about Chatter in a moment, but Chatter is basically your private social network that you can use to collaborate in Skills Wisconsin. And there's a number of cool things you can do in there, but we'll get there in a moment. Below that, your Chatter feed, we have a dashboard snapshot, and this is going to be 3 graphs from a dashboard that will show you some basic information in the system. And dashboards are ways of pulling out information from the system so that you can see it graphically and you don't have to worry about going in and finding things very, very specifically. Then as we get below there, we have tasks and calendars. So these tasks and calendars have to do with other parts of the system where you can set up reminders and you can set up calendar appointments and you can set up meeting requests, but we'll get all to that later. Your home page is really a nice little overview of what's currently going on in the system right now. And then if we look over on our left hand side here, we have our sidebar, and this sidebar is ever present in the system, and you can also hide it. So if you wanted to, you just have to find this little blue line when you hover it and click it, and it can go away, or you can leave it open, and that way you can access these couple of bubbles here. And the top one is a create new, and so this is if you're anywhere in the system, you can create a new kind of data point in the system, or record as it's called, of any of the main tabs up here at the top. And so that's nice and handy to use. Below that, we have some shortcuts just to calendar, some unresolved items. Below that, this probably won't be too filled in for too many of you, but this will be your recent items. And these recent items are the last 10 things that you have viewed in the system. And this is useful for navigating in between objects, so you don't have to go back and find a specific record in the system and slow you down, so you can just hop between your most recent items very easily. And then even below that, we have a box called custom links, where there's links to a number of videos that we've created and hosted on YouTube that are between a minute and a half, 3 minutes, and are just designed to give you a really quick overview of each of the objects. So you can click on these, open them up, and get a really quick refresher if you need to remember something about participants or sendouts or any of that. So that is your sidebar in total. And then the one last thing I want to point out before we jump into Chatter is up at the top you have a global search bar, and so this global search bar will search any key you put in there. So you can search any term, any employer name, any job order name, and it will search through the entire system and find any matches and present them to you. So that's a nice general way to find anything that you're trying to look for in the system. So those are the main components of your home page, and are really designed just to kind of help you get a quick overview of what's going on. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump into Chatter and show you about all the neat, nifty little things that you can do in Chatter. So Chatter is our first tab up here on the top of our home page. When we click on it, it will open up. And what we'll see here is our Chatter feed. So our Chatter feed is very similar to anything if you've used any social network. It shows the most recent activity up top, and you can see we've got a bunch of people on my screen right now are changing their profiles, they're updating it, and just making sure that everything is good and clean. And so you might not see anything currently in Chatter, because Chatter will only show you what you follow. And so primarily what you'll be doing is you'll be following people, but you can also follow records within the system, so you can get updates on different things going on in the system. So first, before we jump into our sidebar, I want to show you what types of posts you can make within Chatter. And you make posts from up here at this top box, where you can see we have 4 different options up here and our big green share button. And so what you can do in here is you can make a post which will be just a text post. You can post just any information out there what you want, and there's 2 ways that you can make these posts. You can make a post to my followers, which means only the people following you will see that information, or you can make a post if you click on this blue link here to a group. And a group is just a group of users that have joined a group, and when you make a post to a group, all the members of that group will be notified of what you post, regardless of if they're following you or not. So what we can see here at the top is we have All Skills Wisconsin, which is a group that all of the members of Skills Wisconsin, so everybody who has an account is a member of this group. And what will happen, we use this for, is we use this to push out information about the system, information that will be useful to everybody, and so that you don't necessarily have to follow everyone in the system to get all of the important updates. We can also see that we have groups set up for each area that have been set up, and then there's also a couple of other that have been set up that other people have set up for their own personal use. Some people will set up groups by county or by different work teams. And then your different types of posts are files, so you can select a file that has either already been uploaded to Salesforce, or you can upload a new file from your computer. After that, you can post a link, which is just a link to any other web page, and you can say anything you want about that. And then lastly, you can set up a poll and to gauge people's responses, and you can put in as many choices as you want. You just click Add More Choices and open up more of these, and you can post any of these to just your followers or to a group. So now that we have covered the different types of posts, I'm going to show you how you can start following people and making sure that you get the information that you need in Chatter. So if we look over at our sidebar here, we'll see a couple of different things. First off, up at the top, we have messages, and this is where you can send messages, private messages, to other users in the system with this new message button up here. Below that, we have our feed, which gives us a couple of different options of what we want to see from our feed. And then below that is people. And so people is where you can find and follow different people. And so what you'll see is if you see a person who you aren't currently following, is you'll see a little green plus button right here with the word follow next to it, and then after you click that, you'll see a blue check mark, and it'll then say following. And that means anytime that person makes a post in the system, you will then be notified of it in your Chatter feed. Now, you might not see any people when you first click on the people subheader. That's because it's going to show you your recently viewed people. So if you're trying to find people that you don't see, you'll probably want to go to all people, and this will show you all. I believe we're at 173 people in the system right now on multiple pages. And so if you don't want to flip through every page, you can just start typing for people's names and find them as they pop up into the system like that. Then below our people subheader, we have groups, and this is where you can find different groups that you'd wish to join. So if you're not currently a member of your area's group, you might want to go ahead and do it, or you can just stay a member of your All Skills Wisconsin. Then lastly, the last thing I want to show on our sidebar is our files. And these are the files that have been posted into Chatter and uploaded. And there's a couple of important things in here that I want to make sure that everybody knows of. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here so we can see it better. And in here, there's a number of support documents that you can access and use. There's a couple that I want to point out to you. First is the most important one is the Skills Wisconsin Job Developer Walkthrough document. This is about a 30-page document that goes over all the parts of the information and the different pieces that we'll be covering today, as well as some things that I might not cover. So this should be your first stop if you have any questions about the system, is check out this walkthrough document. Then below that we have our Chatter tutorial PDF, and so this is a tutorial on Chatter, which is everything that I've been talking about now, and it's a great tool to use to give to people if they're new to the system, especially if anybody's being created with a Chatter only license. This is the document that they would want to view, because it will tell them everything they need to know about Chatter. And then there's two more down here, native Salesforce glossary, and what you might see in the system is you might see some terms being referenced to in the system that you aren't sure what they are, and this glossary will define all of those terms for you. So if you're having trouble remembering what a specific term is referring to in the system, you can use that document. And lastly, we have our Job Developer Data Dictionary, and this is a compilation of all of the fields on each tab. This way you can then know what's on each tab, where it is, and you don't have to necessarily go through each object hunting for where specific information is recorded if you need to learn the system a little bit better. So this document is a great, just comprehensive overview of all of the fields in the system and where everything goes. So go ahead and make sure that you access these documents. That will be very helpful when you're starting to learn the system. And additionally, you can always follow any of these files. So every once in a while we'll come back and update and upload a new version. And when we upload a new version, if you're following that document, it will show in your Chatter feed that that document has been updated. So those are the major components of what you can do in Chatter. But what I wanted to show everybody else is the notifications of Chatter. So you might have noticed, if you've had your account for a day or two, is that you get daily Chatter digest emails. And so you can set up and customize and edit whether or not you get those emails, what they contain, what information you really want to be privy to. So this is a really nice feature because we use Chatter a lot. We have a couple of different client orgs, and we're not necessarily in each one of those all the time. So at the end of the day, we always get these Chatter digest emails, and we make sure that we can keep up on what's going on in each of our clients' orgs. So you don't need to be constantly plugged into Chatter and worried about missing an important message, because at the end of the day, you'll always get that email summarizing for you what's going on in Chatter currently. So to find that, where you need to go is at the top of your screen. You should see a place where it says your name, and if you hover over it, it turns into a blue bubble. And you can click on this and then go into Setup, and then you'll have some less options here, but what you can do is over on the left hand side under Personal Setup, you can see Email. Click on this drop down and then click on My Email Settings, which will set up your email settings there. And then below that there's My Chatter Settings, and under My Chatter Settings is My Chatter Email Settings. So we're going to open up this one. And so what we can see here is we have a number of checkboxes that fill out information about what you want to be notified about, and you can check information. So if you want to be notified every single time a person follows you, whether somebody posts, comments, mentions you, or messages you, and then down here at the bottom you can set your digest email frequency. So you can set to have them daily, weekly, or never. And then below that you can set specific Chatter digests for each of your groups. So if you want to be just made aware of All Skills Wisconsin every week or daily. You can set that apart from your specific areas group. You might want to get those more frequently. So you can scale your email notifications to however you would like it. So that is everything that I wanted to talk about for Chatter today. And we're going to go ahead and move on into our next tab where we says up here at the top it says employers. So we're going to go ahead and actually now get into the different parts of the system. And so this is going to be, we're just going to work through our remaining tabs up here at the top and keep on plugging away. So when you click on any of these tabs up here, except for the last two, so anything between employers and hires, you will be presented with a very similar page. You'll see employers or employer contacts up here at the top. You'll see a view list here, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then below that you'll see your recently viewed. So this box will slowly fill in as you start to use more and more of the system, but these are your 10 most recently viewed records on that tab. So these are showing my 10 most recently viewed employers. And you can open this up down here with this link and make it show 25 if you would like. But I always just keep it at 10 because I find 10 is more than enough for what I'm doing at any given time. So to create a new employer in the system, what you're going to do is you can either click on this create new button over here and select employer, or you can select the new button right here from the center of the tab. And when you click on either one of those new buttons, it will take you to your new employer page. And what you'll see here is a number of fields with lots of information on it, and this is where you start filling in employers that relate back to a standing business that you'd be interacting with. Now, Alyssa has done some data migrations for some of the areas, so some of you probably already have some data in the system, and you need to find those through using views or through using the global search up here. So to find that information, what you'd want to do is probably select first the all view, which if you click on this, after you click on your tab, you click on the drop down. At the very top there will be an all view, and you can click on that, and it will take you to a view that will list out all of the employers. And you can, that was nice. So you can, from this list view, you can view all of the employers currently in the system, and you can limit how many you want to see per page with down in this lower left hand corner this arrow, and you can select 10, 25, 50, 100, or 200 records that you want to display per page. And so I'm just going to bump this down to 50 for the moment. And so when you're in this view, you can sort by any of these top columns here. So if you wanted to sort, for example, by who owns it, so if you wanted to find records that you owned or someone on your team owned, you could click on this and it will sort them alphabetically. Or if you're trying to find the name of a specific company, you'd want to sort them by employer name. And so you might be thinking, okay, great, now that I've sorted it, now I just have to scroll through and find it. Well, if you wanted to just scroll through and find it, if you look again down in the lower left hand corner, there's many, many, many employer records in the system. So it's currently, it's just stopped at 2,000, and it's just saying there's more than 2,000 employers in the system. So what you want to do at this point is look up here in your top right section of this view, and you'll see a bunch of blue letters. And so you can click on these letters, and it will show you only employers that start with that letter. Whereas if you were still sorting by the owner alias, it would show you only owners whose aliases started with that letter. So you can use this to narrow down your search a little bit more and make it easier to find your employers. Or if you know the name of your employer directly and specifically, you can always use your global search, and your global search will show any matching records that you can find. So those are two of the ways that you'd want to find data in the system. The last way would be you can create your own views. So creating a view is relatively simple. We can see in this drop-down that we've got a number of views going on right now. But you might want to create specific parameters to try and find a list of employers in the system that you'd want. And to do that, all you need to do is up here, you should see what you should probably see is a clone and a create new. So we're going to go ahead and click on create new view to walk through what it's like to create a view. And on this page, we will see 4 different steps. And after completing these 4 different steps, you'll have been able to create your new view and find information in the system better. So the first step is just naming your view. And you'll see 2 boxes here. The first one is the only one you need to type into, because as you fill it in, and then you click out of your top box, it's going to automatically name the second one for you. Step 2 is where you build in all of your filters for the system. So filters are what lets you narrow down the employers from the big pool of 2,000 plus to the handful of records that you want. So the first step is to filter by either all employers, which is every employer in the system, or to filter by my employers. And my employers means employers that are specifically owned by you, and ownership just means they are either assigned to you or you created them. So we're going to leave this right now at all employers. Creating new views. So you'll be able to create new views on any of the tabs, once again, between employers and hires. And the way we do that is up here at the top with the views line, we will click on create new view here. And so I was talking about how we have 4 different steps to creating a new view, and once we complete these 4 steps, we will have our view complete. So I was saying the first step, all we need to do is name into this first line here, and it will automatically fill in our second line. Below that, we have our filters, which is where I had left off, and we're going to filter by all employers for right now. And then below that, we are going to have a number of fields that we can filter by. So the first filter is where we select the first field that we want to filter by. So I'm going to go ahead and open up an employer really quickly so we can take a look at what an employer record looks like. So when I say a employer record can be filtered by a field, what I mean is any of these fields that we see right here that we can highlight can be filtered by. So we can filter out employer records off of any of these fields and what they have filled into them. So I'm going to give some basic examples here. We have some fields I'm going to use. I'm going to use WDB area to filter by, and then I'm just going to use zip code as well. So I'm going to steal this zip code to use. And so the way we set up our filters is you select which field you want. So I'm going to go ahead and select our WDB area right here, and then you're going to fill in the value you want that field to equal. And so because we chose a place that is called a drop down, meaning there's only a set number of options that you can choose from, we get a little looking glass that we can then select the value we want. Then I'm going to add in a second filter that is going to be for zip code. So I'm going to find zip. I'm just going to paste in the zip code that I had pulled off that employer record. So once we've set up all the filters, we're then done with step 2, and we can move on to step 3. So step 3 is where we select which fields we want to display. So I'm going to jump back to a view really quickly to show you what this affects. So when we have a view, we have a number of columns right here, and these columns are what we're talking about. So these are the fields that will be displayed in your view. And so right now we can see we have a lot of available fields, but we only have one field selected right now, and that's not entirely useful for us right now. So let's go ahead and we're going to select our address, city, and zip. And you can select multiple available fields by either clicking on one field, holding shift and clicking below it to select them all. Or you can select your one field and then you can hold control to select multiple fields at a time. So you can do address, city, and zip. And then all you need to do is click the add button right here in the middle to add them into the selected fields column. And we're going to go down and we're going to find our WDB area. We'll also take our website so we can check up on those employers if they have a website. And once you've selected the fields that you want displayed, you can also rearrange them with these arrows here on the side. So I'm going to move up WD area because I want to see that up by the employer name. And now I've finished with step 3. And then step 4 is relatively simple as well. And this is restricting visibility to who can see this view. And so the first option that it's going to default to is it's going to default to a private view, meaning I would be the only person who could see this view. The next is visible to all users, which means everybody in the system can see this view. And the last is visible to a certain group of users. So your super users were trained on how you can use different groups of users to limit views to subsets of people within the system. And they can set up views for each of your areas or subsets of people that they want only to have access to that view. So right now I'm just going to leave this one as visible to me, and then we're going to go ahead and click Save. Okay, so then after we've clicked Save, we're now presented with our new view, and we can see here now that those two filters have narrowed it down. We've got all employers from Area 3 and from our zip code 5321. And we'll also see down here at the bottom that it's only displaying 50 employer records because it's parsed through all 2,000 plus to find only the 50 employers that are in that zip code. So that's a little bit about creating views, and that's something that you can use to create views on any tab. And as we move through the system, you'll see how views can be useful or not. So I'm going to go and delete this view just because we don't need it anymore. And we're going to go into creating a new employer again and talking about the records on our employer. So I'm going to click this new employer button up here at the top of this view. Take us in here. So as we look through our new creation layouts and our edits, what you will notice is that there will be a couple of fields that are marked by this red line right here. And this red line is something that is required. So if I were to try and save this right now, it would come back with an error message saying that I have to enter a value into this field because it will not accept that field being blank. So most of the time this will just be a name for the record, but in a couple of other locations you might see these red markers on other places in the system. So right now I'm just going to name this a sample name, and we'll move through here. So there's a couple of different field types, as we'll see in here. And just a quick note is that while we are working through this system, you might notice that my view and your view of what's going on are a little bit different. And this is because the account I'm using is an administrator account and has permissions to see everything in the system, whereas your account might not be able to see some different parts. So if you see a field that you don't see, or you see a section that you don't see, you can just ignore it because it's something that you don't need to worry yourself about. It's just some extra information that was dragged along. So as we move through, I want to show you a couple of different field types. The most basic field types are just your text fields, where you can input any amount of text in here. So this is your employer address, and you can just type in any address into there, and that will save. The type after that is called a drop down, and I mentioned this before, where you have a little arrow here, and you can click a drop down, and it will open up all of the possible options of what you can select from that field. And then below here, where it says location type, we see two below it that are grayed out. These are dependent. So what that means is that these two drop downs are dependent on the one above it. And if you hover over this information sign right to the side of it, it will tell you that it depends on location type. So if we were to select a location type here, the drop downs will ungray and we can select information from them. And if we select a different one, we can see that they're both now ungrayed. So this is the system is just using a little bit of logic to prevent you from entering in information that wouldn't make sense. And then I think the last type of field that I want to show you is this one right here, and this is called a multi-select. So multi-select is similar to a pick list in the sense that you only have set options that you can choose from for that field, but you can choose multiple options. So you can scroll through here, choose the options that you want, and there's another one over here, and a couple more down here. So if you were trying to record how this business had been recruited, you could select that they had come to a job fair and also been to your company website. And that way both are selected, so when we save this record, we'll see that we have both of those in our field. So then there's two other types of fields that are fairly self-explanatory. One is a checkbox, which is simple yes, no, and then the other one is a date field. And the date field has a little pop-up, so you can flip through the calendar to find your date, or you can type in any date that you want. And once you have finished filling out your employer profile, you can either scroll to the bottom and you can click Save to save the record, or you can click Save and New, which will save this record and then bring you to an entirely blank employer creation page again. So if you need to enter 2 or 3 or 4 employers, you can just use the Save and New button to save yourself a little bit of time as you're working through the system. So we're just going to go ahead and click Save. So this is another thing that the system does, is that the system has a deduplication logic behind it. So it has found that up here you can see right here it says duplicates of employer, and so the system has already found that there's another employer that's been named similar to this employer, and so it's not allowing you to create that employer because it doesn't want duplicate data in the system. So usually at this point, if you're creating a new employer, you would then want to take this employer name and plug it into the search bar up here to find that employer record, so you can then edit the employer record instead of creating a new one. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to disable this check and just keep on going. So once you've created your employer, you'll be taken to your employer's page here, where you can see all of the fields and all the information that you have filled in on your employer profile. And also, you'll see below it what are called related lists. So you can see here where it starts with employers contacts, and there's a number of different employer related lists. And so what these are is, it is relating your employer to other pieces of information in the system. So your employer might have some employer contacts, they might have been provided some services, or they might have some job orders that have been put into the system. So these are just showing how information is related within the system. And really what this does is it lets you know everything that relates to this employer from this one page. So you don't have to go hunting down job orders that have this employer's name. It's all interconnected within the system. So you can navigate without having to search for a specific job record through this method. So before we jump into related lists, what I want to show you one more thing is, after you've created an employer record, you can either edit it by clicking this edit button up here, which will take you back to the full edit page, which is very similar to the creation page, or you can double click on any of the fields. So if I wanted to come down to employer zip and just add in their zip, I can double click it, type in a zip code, and then click out of it. And what this will do is it will become orange. And it is orange because it has not yet been saved. So what we'll see now at the top where the buttons, where we had more buttons were, is it now says save and cancel. So we need to click save to make sure that this, my dedupe tool is not cooperating today, but you need to click save to make sure that you save that information in the system, because, for example, since I can't save this, if I were to navigate away from this page and then come back to it, we'll see that that zip code is no longer filled in. So I'm going to come back to our company, and we'll see the zip code did not save because I did not save that record. So, and then the last thing I want to show is you can, the same way you did in Chatter, you can follow people, you can follow information in the system. So you'll see up here we have this gray bar, and click on show feed, and we have a blue follow link with a green plus sign right here. So we can follow different employers or job orders in the system and get updates on that in the system. Now what that means is when a field is updated or a new related list is filled in, it will update in your Chatter feed. Now you might be thinking that looking at this employer profile, there's quite a lot of fields, and you might not necessarily want to be updated every time some new information is filled in, because finding out that they have a Twitter page might not be that useful for you. Well, the following only notifies you when a select number of fields have been updated. And to find out which fields notify you in your Chatter feed, you can find that through finding a file in Chatter. So the same way I had showed you how to find the job developer walkthrough, there should be a document in there that describes which fields are notifying in Chatter. So that is, before I jump into the related list, that's the core of the employer profile. So does anybody, I know we're about an hour in, does anybody have any questions about anything about to do with the system, either it be the home page, navigation, views, chatter, any of that. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask at this time? Okay, I'm going to take that for a no, and we will keep going. So the next thing that I want to show in the system is employer contacts. So really quickly, I'm just going to show you what it looks like from the tab perspective. And what we'll see here is that this looks very similar to our employers tab, but there's some different employer records in here, and it's a different color, and we have a different image. But other than that, we still have the same recents. We have the views. We can create new views, and it's a very similar feel on each tab like this. But I'm going to go ahead and create a employer contact from our employer page. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to employer contacts and click on new contacts. And what we'll see here is we have one page, and there's a lot less fields on this page because this is just specifically referring to the person at the company, whereas the employer profile covers a bunch of information about the company. This one covers information about the employer person at that company, so the employee or the owner. And what we'll see here is we just have mostly information about that person and then contact information. So what I mentioned before with having required fields, we now see we have a couple of different required fields. So there's a total of 4 in here. We need to know the contact's name, first name, last name, and their employer. So since we started on the employer profile and then scrolled down to the related list and clicked the new employer contact, this employer has automatically filled in. But if we had not done that and we had just created a new employer contact with our create new button over here, or gone through the tab, what you can do is we have a little looking glass symbol here, and you can look up different employers. And you can use this, and you can type in a name and hit go to try and find some results and select it that way. And after you select your company, it will automatically fill in there. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in our employer contact's name. And so that is all the information that we need to save this profile. But as always, it's a little better to fill in as much information as you possibly can. So you can fill in information about what their email address is, what their phone numbers are, what their preferred method of contact is, gender, and then information about where they are. So the reason why there's address information on the employer contact profile is because if you're working with a company that has multiple locations, you will want to know which location that they're at. So this is a much smaller profile, but still very important. So we're going to go ahead and click Save for our employer contact here. And we can see we've now been taken to our new page. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. And so under our detail, or our fields here, we can see down at the bottom we have a couple of related lists. We don't have nearly as many as we had on our employer, but we have job orders and job training. So these are the two basic tabs that you'll be using when you're interacting with companies. You'll be entering companies that you work with, and then you'll be creating detail records for the people that you interact with while at that company. And I'm going to click back on our company really quickly. Our lookup fields are actually clickable. If I can get this to go away. Okay, I'm going to go back through here. So now that I have my recent items list, I can also click view on that. I'll take us back here. And down under our related lists, we now have that employer contact that was just created. So there was a question that came through on chat that Alyssa would like me to talk about. And the question is, when you create a view, can you export that into Excel? So let's go ahead and take a look at a view really quickly. I'm just going to open up a new view so that we can see this. And so one thing about views is that they are very specific to just that record. So the one thing that you can do with views is that you can't export them into, per se, Excel, but if you really wanted to, you could click on this button up here that looks like a little printer, and it will open a new window that is a printable view. So if you wanted to create a view to pull out a contact list of people's phone numbers so that you could go through and call them really quickly and you needed to hand that off to somebody, you could print that view and hand it off. But if you are looking to create a Excel sheet from a view, what you would want to do is create a report, and you can export your reports into Excel. And reports are one of the things we'll be talking about towards the end of the call, and that is the way that you'd pull out information. So views are very specific to just viewing information within the system and don't have very many options of getting that information out of the system. So we're going to go back to our Employers tab and show you one other piece of the employer that is very, very important to what many people do in the system, and this is activities. So we have two activities, related lists, and one is open activities and one is activity history. And so open activities are for things that have yet to occur, whereas activity history is for things that have occurred. So when you create open activities, you have two options.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt a second? I'm not seeing you move the cursor anymore. Do I need to back out and re-launch in? I thought I was trying to chat to say I can't see you moving around the screen anymore, but should I back out and rejoin?
If you can't see it, that is what I would try recommending.
Okay, because I can see the screen, but the cursor isn't moving anymore, so I must have lost you a while ago. So, alright, I'll try that. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. So on the employer profile, we'll see two related lists for activities and activity histories. On open activities, you have two buttons that you can use to create something, and they're both very similar. One is a new task, and one is a new event. A new task is for a singular event that would be occurring, so that is something like sending creating a reminder to send an email or call somebody in the future, whereas an event is something that would repeat. So if you want to set up a series of follow-up calls or a series of emails that you want to send out, that would be a new event. But I'm just going to go ahead and open up a new task and show you what this panel looks like. And so what we'll see here is several different fields that are going on that we would then fill in. The first one is this assigned to field, and this allows you to assign new tasks to different people. So if you're a manager and you want to assign a task to one of the people you work with, or if you want to assign it to a coworker because they said they would do some follow-up, you can use this looking glass again to look up and find a user within the system. Then below that we have our subject line, and the subject line is you can think of as the name of the task. And so this is where you'd put in information, just very briefly giving a description of what is going on. And then we have information for what is going on. And so we have a place where we can put in our due date. So I'm just going to say this is for Friday. We can choose what type of activity this is. So it's a call, meeting, email, visit, a to-do, or an other. So I'm going to say that this is a visit. And then you can also put in the time. So you can come in here and select a time, and it's rounded out to the nearest half hour. And then below that is a comments box. And so this is a large text box that you can put in as much information as you need about this task. And so this is where you'd go into much more detail, where you would explain exactly what's going on and leave detailed notes so that if you came back to this in 2 days and you'd forgotten, or if you'd come back to this in a week or so, this would be great for really understand what is going on. And then over in our second column here, we have our related to, which will automatically fill in when you click on your new task. Below that is a status, and you can say what status this is in. And then below that is a priority, and so you can select high, normal, or low. And then lastly is a field for percentage completed. So if you're keeping up to date on something, you could fill in how far along you are on that. So before we scroll down, I'm just going to name this. And we will scroll down. So the last thing that you'll see is that we have this reminder box down here. And this reminder box will set us a reminder in the system. So when you log in, if you have any reminders that are past due, or if you are logged in and a reminder comes due, you will get a little pop-up window that will remind you that you have a task coming up. So I'm going to uncheck this because I don't want to be reminded of a dummy task that I had created a couple days ago. But then below that we have some similar buttons. We have a save button, we have a save a new task button, and then a save a new event button. So if you're creating a couple of tasks and events, you can use those buttons to just quick create multiple and not have to scroll back through the profile to find the buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here, and we will see our new activity down here on our employer. So the next section for activity history is for recording activities that have already occurred with an employer. So this is aimed at building a comprehensive view of all of the interactions with an employer. So you can have what's going to be going on in the future, and then you can have what has been going on. And this way, as you start filling in more activities, you can get a good view of what is going on with a specific employer in the system. So you can find out if they've been contacted recently, if somebody from a different board is working with them, or if they're interested in a certain service, or really any information that's flowing back and forth is no longer held by one person. It's able to be shared, and that way you no longer have to track down people to find out what could be going on with a specific employer. So we're going to go ahead and open up our activity history by clicking this log a call button, which is a little misleading because it's not just for calls. You can see here that we've got the same format, and we can rename our subject line to anything we want. And then we can also change our type. So we can change this type down to a meeting. So from here, we can then create the same information that we had. Select our time, our subject is filled in, our related to is filled in, and then we can scroll down to the bottom, and what we'll see here is we have a section that allows us to schedule a follow-up task. So if we wanted to, we could fill in this information and schedule a follow-up task from the same page. So for example, if I had a meeting and wanted to put a call out to somebody a couple days later, I don't have to go through 2 pages to create those. I could create it all from the 1 page. So I'm just going to type in here. And we'll see here it has the same fields, and we can also set a reminder for our follow-up task. And when we save this, go down here, we now have our activity history, and we have our open activity. So this is a nifty little area that we can use, and as it is more and more populated, it becomes more and more valuable. Now, one thing that people ask for is, why is activities not on the employer contacts profile? Because if we were to open up employer contacts, we'd see that there was only those 2 related lists of job orders and job trainings. And this is because keeping the activities centralized on the profile allows it to be a kind of a one-stop shop of finding out what is going on with that company. You no longer need to click through multiple employer contacts to try and find out what is going on in that company. It's all in one spot for you, and it's much easier to understand. So that is activities in a nutshell, and I know that can be a little confusing. So does anybody have any questions about activities? Okay, so we will go ahead and move on, and things will start to move a little bit faster just because the next couple pieces of the system are not about directly reaching out and just talking to businesses, but have to do with tracking information about job orders and hires and participants. And so those might not be sections that you're as frequently involved in, so we're just going to give a more higher level overview of those objects, and then when there will be additional training later on about a more detailed approach to those objects. So before we move on to job orders, I wanted to show this really simple related list down here at the bottom called services. And a new service will open up a simple page where you can input information on a service that has been provided to an employer. And so what we'll see here is we just have 2 drop downs where we can select a type and a subtype, and then we have a start and an end date, so we can set these to however we'd like. And then our last field is just a rich text field where we can input any and all information that we'd want in there, and we can format it and we can make it look however we want. And once we're finished with our service, we just need to click save, and we're done. So that is really quickly how you record providing services to a company. So we're going to go back now to our employer, and we're going to start into job orders. So as we come down from the employer profile, we'll see we now have our new job order button, and we're going to click this, and I'll open up our job order page. So what we'll see here is a little bit of a different layout, and we're on a different tab now. And it's asking for a couple of required fields, but one thing that I want to point out is that the first two required fields are the name and the employer. And then below that is the employer contact. Now the employer contact is not required for saving a job order, but you can use it to designate a specific person who is in charge of following up for that job order, making the hires, managing the hiring process. And so you can find that person by clicking this looking glass to select the employer contact. So we're going to create a new job order here, and we're going to fill in some information about it, making sure that we fill in all of our red required fields here. We have a stage so that we can mark which stage our job order is at, which can be useful to finding out where in the job order life cycle this job order would be. And then we have a number of dates that we can fill in, and our source. And as we scroll down, we have some information about candidate information, and then down at the bottom we have a rich text field for the job description. And since the rich text field allows formatting, what's nice is if you find a job order online, you can cut and paste the entire job order into this box without having to worry about the formatting getting funky, because it's going to keep most of that formatting for you. So we're just going to go ahead and save this job order here. And we can now see we've got our created job order that is related back to the company and the employer contact that we created. So what we'll see on this job order now is a couple of related lists that we haven't seen before. And so these are our job auth codes up here at the top, sendouts, and hires. And so part of what this system does is you can add job occupational codes, which is job auth codes, to a job order. And then one of the last tabs we saw was a participants tab, and you can add skills to a participant. So saying, okay, this job requires X, Y, and Z skills, and this participant has X, Y, and Z skills. And then you can run reports on matching job orders to participants in the database, or vice versa, matching participants to job orders. And so that way you can expedite the job matching service within the system by easily being able to find matches with reporting. So to create a new job auth code, all you need to do is click this new button. And what we'll see here is we have a name, so you can name this whatever you want. You can name it for, skills on and it's related to a job order. And then below here we'll see we have a long list of checkboxes and grayed out drop downs, and we'll see here that each information tells us that these grayed out drop downs depend on the field above it. So once we check a box, we'll then be able to select which specific occupation code this job order has. And so we can go through and mark any number of job skills that we want. And once we're done selecting our job skills, all we need to do is click Save. And all of these codes are SOC ONET codes. So if you're familiar with using those, a lot of different agencies and different job boards use those, and you can also find complete lists of all these codes on their respective websites. So going back to our job order, I'm going to use our related list over here. We can now see that under our new job auth codes, we have our skills that we've selected, and we can see that all of the skills we've selected are now listed right here. And if we needed to edit those skills, we can go back and edit it, or we can create a new skill as well. So that's how you would take a job order and first input it into the information. You fill out the information in the fields, and then you'd add which skills would then be required. So from here, I'm going to jump into a different section of the system, because we need to have a participant in order to create additional information in the system. So I'm going to go ahead, and we won't talk about the participant too much right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and create a quick, actually I'll use this guy, our Testatom. So Testatom is going to be the participant that we use for the rest of the system. So just know that the next two pieces require participants to be added, and we will talk about participants once we get through those next two pieces. So back on our job order, the next piece that we want to talk about is our sendouts. So sendouts is a term for any time you present a participant to an employer, and this can be anything from sending the employer the resume to an interview. So when you create a new sendout, you're just recording that a participant was presented, and you can see this is a very short form, so it doesn't require too much. All you need is a participant and a date. And so we'll look up for Testatom here. Let's see, we found him. And then you can fill in information about additional notes about what occurred during the sendout, and then you can select which stage. So if this is a resume, phone, or in-person interview, so we'll say it's a phone interview. And then we have results. We have proceeded to next stage, hired, and declined. And if we select either of the top two, nothing else is needed. But if we select declined, our reasons given is filled out. So we can see here there's a number of reasons given for why this person might have been declined, and we can select, because this is a multi-select, we can select any number of reasons that we want, and then after we save it, we'll be taken back to our job order. And as we scroll down, we can see that we now have a sendout. So creating a sendout requires having your job order created, and then also having that participant in the system. And some of you might be thinking, well, we don't really use participants too much, but the nice thing is to create a participant in the system, all you need is their name. So you don't need any exhaustive information, you just need to know that person's name so you can put them into the system. Then lastly, the one thing that we hope to come from all of our job orders is any number of hires. And so to record hires, we have our related list for hires down here. And so we can see here our hires is a little bit of information, but not too intensive. All we need to know is our job order, the hire title, and our participant. So we can type in here our title, we can go find our participant, and then we can fill out any other information. So we can fill out our wage, our pay period, start date, hours per week, what type of employment, and if they have any benefits. So I'm just going to leave this at here, and we're going to click Save. And we've now recorded a hire in the system. So here is pretty much job orders in a nutshell in the system. So we've taken it through taking the job order, creating it, putting some skills on, recording a send out, and recording a hire. Does anybody have any questions as to what relates to a job order within the system? Anything that relates to it? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to that last tab that I had skipped, which is our participants. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to our participants by clicking on our tab at the top of the page. And what we'll see here is a very similar view that we've had, which is a list of our most recent participants and our list of views up here at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and edit our Testatom here. So actually I already have him open. So from Testatom, we can see that this participant only had their name information filled out. But there's a number of other pieces of information that we can put in. And as I had mentioned before, the only red line that we see scrolling through the profile is their name. So if you had a job order and you wanted to record one of those send-outs or hire, you don't need to get very exhaustive. All you need to know is that person's name, and you will be set to record those pieces of information. But I'm going to go ahead and walk through these fields just so you're a little familiar of what these are. So we have information about just general contact information. So we have for numbers, email, address. Below this we have some fields for our personal information. And so this is information about race and ethnicity, languages, date of birth, U.S. citizenship. Lastly, or not lastly, but next we have information about program. So we have information if they have previously been registered in a program, if they're We Adult, OJT, a couple of checkboxes, and then I believe this is lastly we have candidate information. And so this is information about work time employment, so education, wages desired, what their grade is, so A, B, or C, being A being job ready, B meaning they need a little bit of work, C meaning this person probably needs a lot of work. And then a couple of information for driver's license and any background issues that might come up during a background check. And then lastly, if you have access to it, we have a rich text field for cut and pasting in a participant's resume. And so this is all information that you can fill in to a participant. So we're going to go ahead and click Save, go back to our participant profile. And so below all of our fields, what we'll see is our relayed lists. We have a couple of things we've seen before. We have open activities, so you can record activities with a specific participant. We have occupational codes, which we saw on job orders. And this is exactly the same as was set up on job orders with our checkboxes and drop downs. And so I'm going to go back to our participant here. And below that, scroll down so you're not popping around, we have information on our sendouts and our hires, which we had previously created. So that is our participants in a nutshell. I'm going to scroll back up here to the top, and I see we had a question from Pat about uploading. So uploading is possible in the system, and that is something that we had briefly gone over with our super users on their call yesterday. So as Pat has mentioned, if you can use an uploader tool to batch upload participant data, that is something that's going to be done, and that's something that we are slowly going to be training the super users in how to do, so that they can upload and manipulate information with those data loading tools. So you don't have to worry about having to create dozens of participants by hand. That's something that can be done with an uploader tool. So at this point, we only have two things left to cover, which are dashboards and reports. So I want to open it up to any other questions that anybody might have from anything that I've talked about so far today. So does anybody have anything that they would like to ask? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to dashboards and reports. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this dashboards tab. And what you'll see here is, you probably won't see this specific dashboard, but you will see, you should see at least one dashboard that is available for you to see. And a dashboard is really just a graphical representation of a number of reports. So what you can see in here is we've got, I believe this is 9 different graphs. Yes, so we have 9 different graphs here, and each one of these is a different report. So we can click on our users logging in report and see who's been logging in, and we can see that this is our detailed report here. We can scroll through and see lots and lots of information that have been going on. So now let's go ahead and talk about reports a little bit. What we can see if we click on our reports tab is I have access to seeing many folders, but what you will see is access to only a couple of folders that pertain to your area. And you could use these to walk through and navigate and find different reports that you could see and use, or you can then create and save your own reports into these folders. Now, Sue, I actually have a question for you. Do you want me to take some time and actually walk through some report creation?
Sorry, I was unmuting you. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Do you want me to walk through some report creation, or do you want me to kind of save that and I can point them to some information where they can find out about creating reports?
Yeah, that might be the best. I think at this point people's minds are probably kind of trying to figure things out.
Okay.
I mean, you might do a little just showing sort of the grand reports, dashboards, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that dashboard I had showed everybody just a moment ago this is the overall Grants Goals dashboard, but eventually your super users will be creating a Grant Goals dashboard that is specifically just for your area. And so this dashboard will then be able to track your area through the grant goals. And I believe, Sue, we're still working on the specific numbers per area for each of these goals. That's correct?
No, each of the areas has their numbers and
Oh.
their contracts with the project.
Okay.
We haven't entered anything in here that would show like those numbers and then progress towards those goals. So that's one of the pieces that we might be able to do is show.
Got it.
How close are you getting?
Great. So yeah, so you have your goal numbers, and so your dashboards will then reflect your progress towards those numbers. And you can also then eventually create dashboards that will show any other information. So I know some people would like to create dashboards to manage their job order pipeline, so they can manage where job orders are, or they can manage activities with employers to see what level of employer engagement is going on. And really, this probably doesn't make too much sense to a new user, but as you get to know the system and you get to really learn the power behind reporting, you can then report on literally anything in the system. So what I want to show you, just kind of to wrap up today, is where you can find more information on reporting. And so if we go back to our chatter, we have and back into our files, I'm going to open up our walkthrough here. And when you click on a file, you'll get a nice little preview once it loads. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Actually, I'm going to open this up all the way. And so we can see here, this is the front page. This is just our title page. And we have a number of sections here about what's going on in this walkthrough. And towards the end, we have section 5, which is all about reporting. And then section 6, which is about dashboards. So I'm going to try and see if I can scroll through here really quickly and find the right pages. Oh, almost there. So here we go for reportings. And so this walks through the first steps of report creation, the different steps into creating reports, different things you need to take into consideration, as well as where to save it, and then how to create dashboards off of those reports. Additionally, I have posted and shared with the super users a link to an interactive training about reports and dashboards, and that's something that if you're more interested in learning more about dashboards and reports, I think it runs about 35 minutes, but it can be shorter if you're a little quicker with the training. I've shared with the super users, so if you want to find out more information about that, you can ask them to get that link from their private group in Chatter. So those are a couple of places that you can go to find out more information about reports. But that is everything that I had to show you today. So does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask?